Blessing. If I can get this here. All right. Will this be able to fit in there? Okay. All right. Yes. It is a joy to use what has been freely given for the Most High. We have all been given gifts and talents, and it is up to us to give back to the one who gave so freely to us. And as a former probation correction officer in this county, I took it upon myself to minister to the inmates that I was over. And I thought that when I got there that I was going to go and save them. But as it turned, I did the best that I could to make a difference, but the Most High used them to save me. And I was humbled, being a fourth generation Seventh-day Adventist Christian out of St. Louis. I thought that, what could I learn? You know, I can teach, I can do these things and let everybody know what God has done and this, that. I had it all up here, but I didn't really have it here because it was all I knew. Church school, elementary school, and then Adventist elementary, Adventist high school at Oakwood University. I thought that you'd have a tendency to feel like, well, you know him. And there's nothing you could be told. But I was so mistaken when I became a correction officer. I was humbled by those that didn't even know God. And he can use anything to teach you if your heart is open to be taught. And so I stand before you humbled, a new man. And that anew, I want to give what he has given me and give back to him. So again, I want to thank the Most High for allowing me to be here. I want to thank Dr. Smith for being so kind to invite me, he and his wife, and it's good to be back. And also a shout out to my big brother, Tim Alexander, who I've known since 1989. And a lot of the tracks that you hear, many of them, Tim has done. And he helped me on my CD, and whenever I'm in a bind and I need something done, Brother Tim is always there for me. So it's always good to see you, Brother Tim. I was at my home church in St. Louis, Missouri, getting up to sing, and I looked out in the audience, and there was Brother Tim. I thought he was following me. But I love him like a brother, and he's been always so good to me. I want to start with a song that is more of a prayer. And my great-grandmother, as I would be talking more about her, she used to always tell me before I got my right as I got my license at age 16, she used to say, boy, you need to just be still sometimes. You're always doing something fast. You need to slow down. So she was always agitated because I was just always in a rush. So I would take her to go get her medication. And I remember I would always, whenever the light would turn green, I would try to time it and then go right as it turned green and then shoot out. And she told me that I need to be careful because sometimes you get in accidents like that. But you know, as a 16-year-old, it goes in one ear and out. Matter of fact, it didn't even go in one ear. It went up, over, and out. And so this one particular time I can remember, I always made that my practice. As soon as the light turned green, I would shoot out to be the first car out in the intersection. And so there I was with her, getting ready to take her to the hospital to get her medication. And she was telling me a story, and I was waiting for the green light to come so I can shoot out into the intersection. And just as she was telling me a story, the light turned green, and I didn't have a chance, because I was so enraptured in her story, I didn't have a chance to do what I normally did, race out into the intersection. Had I not been listening to my old wise great-grandmother, and I did what I normally did, there was a police car chase that had I shot out as usual, it would have easily hit and probably killed us from the speed in which it was going, and it went right across. And I stopped, and I knew, and my great-grandmother looked, and she just started praying. She said, thank you, God, for covering your children. And I remembered the phrase in which she would say, covering your children. And that's what he does to us each and every day. They say when we get to heaven and we talk to our accompanying angel, he will let us know the many, many times that the Most High has covered his children. And I just want to say that I'm so happy that he has covered this sinner man, that I need his covering. I don't know about you this morning, but I need his covering every day and every hour. And I thank him, because if it were not for his covering, the enemy would take us out. Look at what he did to Job. Look at how he was just rushing to do devilment. That's what he wants to do to us. And the Lord tells him sometimes when we need a little shaking up, he'll say, do what you will, but don't take their lives. And now that we have our lives, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to make a difference in the lives of others? Or are we going to continue to live a selfish life? This song is my prayer song. Cover me. Cover me. Listen to the words. Every day and every hour. Yes. Oh, cover me with righteousness and cover me and count me with a blessed. Suffer me to come to thee and hide my nothingness. Cover me, O Lord, with your righteousness. Lord, I've doubted. Cover me with your faith. And Lord, I've hated. Oh yes, I want you to cover me with your love, your sweet love. 'Cause I am wretched, I'm blind and naked, and my best. Lord, won't you cover me with your righteousness? Say yes, Lord, Lord, suffer me to come to thee and hide my nothingness. Cover me, and Lord, won't you cover me? And please, won't you cover me with righteousness? How many of you want the Lord to cover you? Every day and every hour is what I want. I want to be covered because I know the enemy seeks to take us out. So we need to always ask for his covering, and when he gives it to us, make a difference with this covering in the lives of others. My scripture this morning, and I want to thank Sister Collins for reading the scripture so very wonderfully. Thank you, ma'am. I shall go and read the scripture yet again in your hearing as we look again to John chapter 15, beginning with verse 12. John chapter 15 and beginning with verse 12 down to 17. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no man than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all things that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he will think about it, he may give you. These things I command you, that you love one another. He didn't ask, he commanded. But it seems that many of us have a problem with loving one another. We will profess to love God all day long until we turn colors. But unconditionally, agape-like, loving our brothers and sisters, there is where many of us have problems. My subject this morning is no greater love. No greater love. Bow your heads to the Most High Yah, and to your only begotten Son, our Redeemer, Yeshua, to the awesome Holy Spirit. I come this morning to open my mouth as your Spirit fills it and gives me the words that you would have your children, as well as myself, to be nourished on this morning. I ask that my sinful nature does not impede the perfect word that I am asking that you give me this morning. And I thank you for the love you have given us. And I ask that we may take the love and discharge it to our brothers and sisters. And that, Father, upon that day when we see you again, you may gather us and we may live all together with thee forever. And if there be any praise whatsoever, let it all go to Calvary. In your name I pray. Amen. We shall come back to our powerful scripture. But when I was a little kid in St. Louis, my great-grandmother had a hold on my life. Her name was Frankie Lenny Lee Perry. She was named after her father, Frank Williams. Perry was her married name, so her maiden name was Williams, named after her father, Frank. My great-grandmother was born in 1902, and she helped to raise me along with my mother and my aunt. And her father was 7 years old in 1863 when President Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. But he was 45 when she was born, so he was middle-aged when she was born. That's why I am so close to the slavery days in terms of my birth. For my great-grandmother, who helped to raise me, her father, being 45 when she was born, was 7 years old when Lincoln freed the slaves. So when you think about that for a moment, many people say, hey, forget about slavery. That was in the past. That was in the past. But for me, it was very real in my household. For my great-grandmother would pontificate all types of stories and experiences and testimonials of life as the daughter of a slave. And her life was the life that many right after slavery, the generations right after, began the planter sharecropping system. The planter being the previous slave owner, the sharecropper being the previous slave or captive. I might use slave and captive interchangeably because that's what they were, captives from Africa. I am one that I wish that we didn't have to have Black History Month. Because if we were taught these things in school along with everybody else's history, European history, Native American history, Hispanic history, all the histories of all the folk were evenly taught in school, we wouldn't have to have a Black History Month. But we have it because we have been ignored. That's why we have that month. But I don't just allow for February to be the time that I become conscious of what my ancestors did. I share all year round. For the things that they have contributed to this country and to the world, all of us, red, yellow, black, and white, benefit each and every day. Just look up the inventions, and you will see that this is true. Why must we shortchange these former captives and relegate it to the shortest month of the year, February? So I celebrate all year round. My great-grandmother used to, as she was cleaning up the house, I hated to see her get on her hands and knees and scrub the floor. She didn't like using the mop for some reason. And I'd say, and she was born in Brownsville, Tennessee. And my great-grandfather hoboed, that's right, hoboed up to St. Louis in 1919, a year after my grandmother was born. And in 1926, my great-grandmother and my grandmother came up to St. Louis to settle there. And that's how we were all born there. So I would like to listen to my great-grandmother's stories. And she would say, how come you're the only grandchild I have that likes to put up with this old woman? Because I figured that her testimony, her stories were like encyclopedias. You didn't get to learn these things in the schools, for they weren't even teaching these things. So as a child, I would listen to my great-grandmother, listen to her friends, for she was a deaconess at church. And when her and her girlfriends, as she would call it, Sister Humphrey and all of them would get together on Sabbath after church, they'd go and talk about the old days. And I'd be the only youngster there while everybody else was playing outside, running all over the church. I'd be sitting there listening to their stories. And during the weekday, I would go to the library and get my library books, Negro in America history book, and I'd climb up in my treehouse, and there I would watch and read about Mrs. Rosa Parks and Miss Maya Angelou and all of those who had gone ahead and fought and died for us. That's how I would learn. Now, at a Christian school, I was at a African-American Adventist school, St. Louis Junior Academy, we were taught these things about the Black historical figures. But in the other schools, my friends, public schools, they weren't taught these things. So as a young boy on my street, I would be standing there before my voice changed. So did you guys know what happened when the first man, and they would be sitting there. Dave, how do you know so much? Because of my great-grandmama. And as she would get on her hands and knees and scrub the floor, I would get on the floor to try to help her. Get out of my way, boy, because you don't clean right. And she would start to sing these songs, hum them, and then sing these songs. For her favorite singer was Mahalia Jackson. And when she wasn't playing the album, and I'm talking about the 78s, the 45s, when she wasn't playing those, she would be singing these songs that would allow for her to work harder and at the same time enjoy her labor. And I didn't understand it. And then she says, boy, I want you to tell me what these songs mean, because you know they have a hidden meaning. What, Mama? She said, you just listen. And so she would start with a song like, let us break bread together on our knees. Let us break bread together on our knees. When I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. Then she'd break out in something else like, gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside to study war no more. Well, I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. My Lord, ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Then she would go with, wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. My God's gonna trouble the water. Come on and wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. My God's gonna trouble the water. Then she would go on to, well, I'm on my way to the Canaan land. I'm on my way to the Canaan land. I'm on my way, Lord, to the Canaan land. I'm on my way, praise the good Lord, I'm on my way. If my preacher don't go, I'll journey on. If my preacher don't go, I'll journey on. If my preacher don't go, Lord, I'll journey on. Yes, I'm on my way. Praise the good Lord, I'm on my way. And at last, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Well, I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels, they were coming after me, coming for to carry me home. Sweet Lord, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Sweet Lord, sweet chariot, coming, coming, coming for to carry me home. So she said to me, I want you to go and tell me what those songs, why they were being sung. I said, what do you mean, Mama? She said, well, come Monday, I want you to go to the library and I want you to read up why those songs were being sung on the plantation like my daddy told me. You tell me why. So when Monday came, I couldn't wait till school let out, and I raced down to the library. My library card was so wrinkled up for use after use after use, and I got the books, and I couldn't wait to get to my treehouse, climbed up the tree, and there I opened up a world of knowledge. And then I started to realize what my great-grandmother was trying to tell me. For we all know about a lady which was my great-grandmother's, one of her favorites, Miss Harriet Tubman. Miss Harriet Tubman was the conductor, one of the lead conductors, one of the most famous conductors of the Underground Railroad, an informal system, but a well-organized system of slaves, captives, former captives, of white abolitionists, and other activists that got together and provided ways for escape from the plantation, through the creeks, through the wilderness, to homes across train tracks, some places where they were caves or hideouts, all of these passages that led out to the river. And many a times it was that old Ohio River. And then when they would get on and they would see Miss Tubman there, but before she could make her some odd 13 missions from the south up to the north and back and forth, more than 70 families were saved because of her courage and heroics. And so this was on the heels of Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey and the escapes that had happened on the plantation. So the slave owner was paranoid because he thought the slaves, when they would huddle together more than two at a time, he had to disperse them, for he knew they must be talking about escaping. So how could they get their messages of escape across? As Frederick Douglass said in his autobiography, they did it through song. And a singer, one of the best singers, was selected. And while they were out there picking the cotton, and the overseer was there sitting on the horse waiting for them to act up so he can crack the whip on their backs, they would lull him into a sense of relaxation as their beautiful four-part harmonies filled the air. And I'd imagine they, as my great-grandmother would tell me, they would sing it so pretty to just, you could close your eyes and just sway. And I could see him now in my mind's eye, swaying on the horse, as my great-grandmother would say, just swaying. Said, boy, just as long as you pick that cotton, you can keep on singing all day. I love it. And while they realized that he loved their music, the slave that was the strongest singer had the he had the task of leading the songs, and in those songs were codes that were embedded. And so as I sang the song in a particular order, I did that on purpose so that we could paint this picture even better. And so when they would begin the song, one slave or two were designated to leave, to go with Moses, as Mrs. Tubman's nickname was Moses. And those who were designated to go, they had to really listen up as that head slave would be singing the song. And the question would be, what time are we going to meet our Moses in the woods? Then they came with that song, let us break bread together on our knees. Let us break bread together on our knees. Here we go, here we go, here we go. When I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun. And so that slave in the back, who was nervous because he knew that if he got caught, he could die. And he knew once he went with Miss Moses, it was a one-way trip. You wasn't going, I think I'm going to go back. She pull out that pistol, you would? I think I can hang out with you for a little while, Miss Moses. Where you want me to go? It's something how a gun can change your plans. And so that slave was rest assured to know we're going to leave early in the morning. But where? Because I'm nervous. Where are we going to meet? Okay, we're going to leave early in the morning. Wait. And so that the head slave would, or head captive, if you will, would change the song up. I got you, I got you. And as they picking and looking at the overseer who's had his eyes closed and tried to, whoa, they sure can sing. They came up with the other song. Gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside, down by the riverside. So that slave who's designated to go, okay, early in the morning, by the riverside, okay. But then, as they continued on, there were sometimes those slaves who got scared, as in John Brown, because Harriet Tubman assisted John Brown, the white man who gave his life. We don't talk about him enough. We talk about agape love. Gave his life and his son's life to free his black brothers and sisters. Died for the cause of freedom for the slaves. I'd argue we should have a day for him. We should talk about him more. And Harriet Tubman would assist John Brown with men, former slaves, and they would assist John Brown on his raid on Harper's Ferry. And so the word went out that these other slaves, as they did with John Brown, would tell on other slaves who were planning to escape, thinking that the master would give them better clothes, better mush. Yeah, slave mentality some of us still have, and it comes in different colors too, okay? I preached that last year, if you can remember. And so to keep from that, they would sing this song, because if the search was on for a runaway slave, they got these bloodhounds that'll pick up the scent of the slave. And then so to throw off the scent, to let them know that when you start out early in the morning by the riverside, you might want to step in the river for a little while, because the dogs might be out to throw off the scent. You have to wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. My God's gonna trouble the water. So they stayed in the water, let the hounds go by, and then they came out. Can you imagine what they went through? We go through issues and struggles in our lives and we just complain. Can you imagine? And we already, I should say it right, and we's free. We's free, huh? And we complain about our lives. Just think about those who went before you start to complain, and others who are around you that are less fortunate than you. And maybe you won't be so quick to complain, you'll thank God for what he's given you, even in your struggle. They did this just to be free, what we take for granted today. And then they come with, where were they finally going? You see, in 1850, they passed the Fugitive Slave Act. So this meant that, you see, the North and the South were starting to have problems over this thing called slavery. You see, for the South, their whole industry was built off of slavery. The slave was the one that ignited their economy. So they weren't trying to end slavery. But the North was having a problem because the South, a slave owner would take his slave up to the North, and what he would do is underbid the Northerners. If their job was to be done, and let's just say, for example, we'll charge $100. Well, that slave owner will bring his slave and say, we'll do it for $60. Well, it's going to go to the lowest bid. It's going to go to the one that could save that man more money, so he's going to take the one that gave him the lowest bid. And so, of course, he'd get all the money. He wouldn't share it with the slave. The slave would do all the work. So the Northerners were getting angry. The Industrial Revolution was about to start, and he's saying, well, wait a minute. They're eating into what our business, and we got to stop this. It wasn't because they spiritually and morally they knew slavery was wrong to enslave your brothers. Oh, no. It had to do with money, money, money. So now slaves were escaping the South and going up to the North and living a free life, doing well for themselves, such as Frederick Douglass. So then the South said, now we're about to have a problem here. So what we'll do is they got Congress to pass the bill, the Fugitive Slave Act, 1850. So now, as you can remember the story, 12 years a slave, if you were up in the North walking around free and you happen to be black, whether you had your papers or not, some Northerner who wanted to get paid can just grab you, kidnap you, sort of like the movie, and send you down into slavery and get paid. So just merely going to the North was not enough. You had to keep going north. Keep going as in, well, I'm on my way to the Canaan land. I'm on my way to the Canaan land. I'm on my way, Lord, to the Canaan land. Oh, yeah. I'm on my way. Praise the good Lord. I'm on my way. Canaan. That was to let the slave know where the final destination was. Canaan, C-A-N-A-A-N. Canada, C-A-N-A-D-A. That was the final destination. So when they were going past the northern states to Canada, they would sing that song. So those who were to run off with Moses would know our final place is Canada. And today, I have friends from Oakwood. Today, many of the black people that live in Toronto, Canada, they owe their origins to that land from the Underground Railroad that came up, points north, all the way north to Canada. Read about it. So, that was the song they sang. And of course, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, when they were out from the plantation, into the woods, through the creeks, through the water, through the trees, up under bushes, actually digging a ditch and getting underground, all that they had to do, and they finally made it to the Ohio River. And when they looked out, and they saw that canoe coming their way, then they can sing, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. That canoe was a chariot to them, and they would go home across the Ohio River, what was then considered the North, that Mason-Dixie line, and they were free. So the slave would sing these songs, and my great grandmother would make me learn these songs and know what their codes were, "Still away home, I ain't got time to stay here." Yeah, that's when that slave owner overseer would be on the horse just listening to the beautiful music, and then it'd be 30 in that group that day, and then one would steal away, and then the next day it'll be 29. And then he would steal away, and then it'll be 28. But he's so caught up in the music, he didn't realize that Miss Moses was stealing them away from the plantation up to freedom. Oh man, I tell you, when God decides that he's going to do his thing after we wait, and just like Job, we all have to wait on him. But when he does what he does, he's always on time. And when you look back, you can say, only Yah could do something like this. They were supposed to be uneducated. How did they learn to do this? And then I'd argue with this. Why did everything they do have something to do with Israel and Hebrews and the Moses story when they barely knew of it? How did they know these things? And incidentally, before I move on, the term Massa, M-A-S-S-A, we always hear that, and those of us who watch Roots growing up, so on and so forth, my great-grandmother used to say, that's how in our broken English, because we weren't formally taught the language, it was usually taught after we were whipped, our folks were whipped. They had to learn how to speak English in a broken English type of way, what we call Ebonics, huh? And so in the African dialect, when I was over there in Africa, it's more smooth sounding words and syllables and not the hard sounding European type of words, Germanic words. So master, that's kind of hard, master. It was more smoother to say massa. So we assumed that when that slave would look up and talk to the slave owner and he would say, "Massa, Massa," we even would joke about it. "Massa, Massa." But did you know what the word massa means? And many and most of the slaves knew what it meant. How did they know? Look it up. Massa was a term, it's a Hebrew word meaning oppressor. Oppressor. How did that captive know a Hebrew word? Well, like my great-grandmother used to say, "David, on Monday, you look it up." I'll tell you that's your homework. Look that up. M-A-S-S-A. And things that make you go, Look it up. Look it up. Okay, now. I talked about Black history. I talk about Black history should not just be relegated for February. Black history, European history, Hispanic history, Asian history should be all day, every day. It should be evenly taught. For we all make up this country. Our history should all be evenly taught to the people. It should not just be one history, because by doing that, we cheat the other histories, and at some point they come together, they amalgamate. But when you just keep it one history, you tend to not tell the truth because you're denying the other histories. So I'm here standing before you this morning saying that all of our histories should be evenly taught the truth. And so we are here. You know, when we decide that this is going to be Black History Month, we are being told what to do. I argue every Sabbath something should be said about a pioneer that risked their lives. For if we just wait until February, we become sheeple. Sheep-like people that think like sheep, that are willing to be led any way that a leader, whether good or bad, takes them. Think outside the box. Know who you are. Whoever you are, know that you are a child of God and you are special. So all history should be taught and all history should be celebrated. For the powers that control our nation has a hatred towards a certain group of people, and that is why we have, again, Black History Month, where you just turn on the television, I just turn it off, where you see an unarmed person of color being abused and killed by the cops. Over and over and over again, you see this. You see this. And 400 years of some type of slavery, whether it's physical or mental. You have the years of 1619 to about 1865 of physical slavery. And then from that point on to about 1954, some would argue even into the 60s, you had Jim Crow. And then you look now. Are we really free? I was a probation correction officer. And I saw the disparity in the sentencing when I would go with the inmate to the court, and I would look at the crimes and I would see the imbalance in the sentencing. There's still some form of slavery that we are in. This thing runs deep. And when we look at our scripture tells us, especially verse 13, greater love hath no man than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. Well, many of us today, we ain't even near that point. We don't even like our brothers and sisters, let alone lay down your life. We don't see that kind of love today, but we were commanded to do so. For 400 years of this madness, this thing about race and prejudice and color, it comes in different shades and colors, I tell you. For all racism and prejudice and discrimination, all of it is wrong. Dr. King used to say that black supremacy is as evil as white supremacy. So until we realize that we are all brothers and sisters trying to get to the same place, man, we're gonna have problems. There are many who come to church on Sabbath and sit up in the pulpit and sit up in the pews and think they got it going on, and they just waiting for Yahshua to break the sky. They waiting on him because they feel they got it all going on. They got the right faith, the right complexion, or whatever the case may be, but yet they don't love their brother and sister who looks different from them. How then will you enjoy heaven? Because there's not going to be a black side or a white side or a brown side or a red side. We're going to all be together. And if you can't get with that now, you might as well change your ticket and go somewhere else, because you won't enjoy being there with all that love. Come on now, you ain't going to love that. Lady said to me, I can remember there's a term called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, a term created by psychologist Leon Festinger. Cognitive is the act of knowing and perceiving something. Dissonance is disagreement or discord or disconnect with something. So cognitive dissonance is opposing views at the same time. It is a state of conflict in the mind whereby you have two opposing views at that same time. The theory suggests that the mind naturally wants to eliminate dissonance, that disconnect, wherever possible. So in order for a man to hate another man, he cannot have cognitive dissonance in his mind. He can't like him and hate him at the same time. He can't love him and then want to do harm to him at the same time. So that dissonance has to dissipate, and it has to be somewhere where it's a common ground. Either he's going to hate him all the way or love him all the way, but he can't have that lukewarmness, that dissonance in between. So if so, the dissonance grows. In order to be at peace with his mind and heart, he will either have to fully love his neighbor and choose to see the good in him, or he will decide only to see the bad in him. And when he decides to give way to hate, he must only concentrate on the negatives of his neighbor and then spread that vitriol to others in order to think like him, so that when the hate is spread out and the course of lies and stereotypes are mixed in, added to the recipe of hate, Then when the propaganda is at its zenith, and many sheeple have brought into this philosophy of hate, then one will feel justified to take the hatred to another level. That is physical harm to a perceived enemy. What am I saying? What am I saying? When a person, Christopher Columbus, when he sailed to the Americas, some would say that he had thought he was in India when he rolled up in Haiti. And when he saw the natives that came out, which were the Arawak natives, he thought that they were Indians. And so erroneously, instead of naming the people what their names were, the Arawak, he said Indians, thinking he was in India. That name, through the arrogance of colonialism, that wrong name, stuck. And so we know them as cowboys and Indians. But they weren't from India. So these ones, and a lady next door to me from India, she told me that. She said, oh, I'm so tired of them calling them Indians. We're the Indians. We're from India. So I said, all right. So anytime I get some knowledge anywhere, I'm going to learn something. And so when Columbus got to Haiti and realized he wasn't in India, he saw the Arawak that came out and greeted him. He with the Spanish, they came out and they were very nice, and he even wrote back to the Queen of Spain, these are some wonderful people, very nice. When our ships got stuck in the marsh or whatnot, they helped us, they guarded over our stuff, they fed us, they treated us well. They're handsome people, they talk well, they are very nice. He said only good things about them. But then after a few weeks, when he realized they had gold, he realized he wanted to take that gold from them, but he had that cognitive dissonance, if you will. I just wrote a letter saying what a wonderful group of people they are, but then on the other side, they got this gold, and I need to get this gold from them so I can be rich. I throw some to the Queen and King of Spain a little bit, but in order to, I can't sleep at night because I got these two opinions in me. I got to have some peace. So he wrote her another letter and said, I suppose if you give me only 50 men, I could take over this little island. And matter of fact, they're the most ignorant type of people. He wrote a scathing letter to the Queen saying the very opposite, because in his mind, he had to eliminate dissonance. And he had to come to the conclusion, in order for me to do something to these people, I've got to make them do something to me. There's something in them that makes me to have to do something to them. He was trying to create an excuse to harm them. Harm them. And if you read your history books, they did some terrible things to the Arawak natives. Terrible, terrible things, until it came to the point where the Arawak would rather commit suicide, go up to the highest peak of the mountains with their babies and jump off because of the tragedy suffered through what Columbus did. But that cognitive dissonance is what we have today. I've seen it as a correction officer. I've seen the difference in how certain people are treated. Certain people are told different things about a certain group of people so that the other group can hate this group, but that group never did anything to that group. So you have these things sort of on the corner. If you see two guys, men of color, just standing on the corner talking, the police would come by and say, hey, break it up. Where do you think that came from? The plantation. Remember when I told you? They had to use songs because they couldn't talk to one another because of the successful escape attempts like from Nat Turner and whatnot. So this fear that when they get together something is going to happen is still prevalent today with the police. With the police. I've seen the difference with my own eyes. This is hate. If we want to get to heaven, we can't go to heaven with that in our bags. You got to let go of that hate if you really want to make it in. And so when a person wants to do something to another person, they've got to create We call it stereotypes. They got to magnify these stereotypes. They got to create things in order to feel right and justified in causing harm to that person you dislike. This is that cognitive dissonance, giving yourself an excuse to hate your brother. I was talking to a lady who was Vietnamese last week, and she was telling me that when she came into this country, she was called bad names, racial names, and she was mistreated badly. And I was feeling sorry for her as I listened to her story. And she was saying, oh, we went through this. It was hard to get to this country. My mother and father, we enjoy being in this country, but we on our street, they put signs up and called us Ching Chong and all these terrible names. So she was going on. And I was right there with her, feeling sorry for her, empathizing. Yes, I understand. Yeah. And then she said, yeah, but I know your people went through worse than mine. I didn't know that one was coming. I thought, here we go. Can't I just be there for somebody else's pain? Why they always got to throw our stuff in there? I see it every day when I turn on the TV. So then she said, but I know your people. You know what I'm talking about, because your people, whoo, I know y'all went through a lot. I said, yeah. So what else about your mother? So I tried to, deflect it back. Well, I can remember, and she continued on, when we would play on our street, we had just gotten into this country. We were being persecuted, if you will. But my mother, I remember I was outside playing with some of the black kids on the street, and my mother said, you get back in here, don't play with them. So I said, oh, man. And why did your mother say that? Well, because, she said, they were bad people. And I said, Mom, they're not bad people. And I said, no, if you don't mind me. I said, do you know the history of this country? Well, no, but I just know that, what people say about black. I said, okay, I understand. But where are you now? She says, well, I had a chance to go to USC, and I had a chance. We lived over in the neighborhood. We moved to a better neighborhood. We did this, and now I'm doing this, and now I'm living here in Santa Monica, and I have a great house, and I have this. I said, now, how did you were telling me about the racism and the persecution that you experienced growing up. And then now you have the opportunity to live wherever you want. How do you think that those freedoms were brought? They were, somebody had to pay for that. So she, well, what do you mean? I said, See, sometimes most people are sheeple, and the leader, the shepherd, is the media. Yeah? And I said, and until you read, what does the African proverb say? Unless the lion learns to read and write, then the tale of the hunt will always be told by the hunter. Do you get where I'm going with that? Until you learn to read and write yourself, till you go out and meet somebody yourself, guess what? You might like them. Then you'll start to question and think outside the box and critically think, well, why am I being told to dislike them? You see, the truth will set all of us free. So I said to her, you tell me that your mom did not want you to play with the black kids, but it seemed like the black kids were struggling worse than you. And you don't play with, why? She couldn't tell me why. So her mother came to the country already hating black people. I said, well, what did black people do to you in Vietnam? What? We over here trying to get our freedom. You're over there trying to get your freedom. I would think we would come together, huh? But y'all hating us and y'all already being hated? This doesn't make sense. So I tried to tell her, I said, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, have you ever heard of that? Well, I think we studied it in school. I said, And I said, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, have you ever heard of that? I said, the Immigration Act of 1965, have you ever heard of that? Do you know how those bills, which benefits everyone, women, the alternative lifestyle, everyone benefits from these bills where they can live where they want to live, work where they want to work, do the things that they want to, enjoy the American dream, if that is so. I said, how do you think that came about? Well, I said, the struggle of black people. Now, there were some conscientious white folks that came in and loved even to death, that helped and put their lives on the line and others. But black people stood up and said, we're tired. We're willing to die for this. I said, I'm sure you saw the movie Selma. Yes. I said, well, what do you think that was all about? That march, they were beaten down so they can have the right to vote. And then the voting rights bill was passed because of their persecution and the fact that they stood up instead of sitting down. And others that come into the country step right over these folk that fought, bled, and died so that you can enjoy your freedoms. And these folk come to the country, and what they say, we don't want to play with those people. Really? Know your history. Know what really happened. I'm fired up about this. Why? Because I met and I worked and performed for some of the civil rights folk. I'm not telling you what I read. I'm telling you what they told me. 3 hours I spent on the couch with Mrs. Rosa Parks. 3 hours. I had to speak for her 2 times, 1994. And it was a wonderful time. I was so embarrassed. I felt like I didn't belong there. I was 25 years old, youngster. And I can remember I was waiting up in the room, in the hotel room, and they were naming the Metrolink in Linwood in her honor. So they wanted someone that sounded like Dr. King to come up and do a speech and to sing the Black National Anthem. So when they called me, I was even nervous on the phone. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. So when the time came, I said, when she comes, can you call me from my room? They said, yeah, sure. I said, because before the program comes, I want to meet her. All those years watching a salt pepper haired, beautiful woman with glasses on, being fingerprinted. All those years watching it in my history book. I finally get to meet her, perform for her. This was too much for me. I started to doubt what I had. I thought, man, am I going to forget? I know these speeches, but am I going to forget the words? Am I going to forget to sound like him? Who am I? This was her pastor. And so finally, I got the call. Remember, I picked it up. Hello? Oh, yes, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Parks is downstairs, and she'd like to meet you because she wants to ask you a question. I thought, Mrs. Parks. And so I got to the elevator and went down, and I saw these 2 security guards standing up right by the green room. I walked into the green room, and there I saw a little old lady with her back turned. And she seemed to be eating all the finger food, the cheese and everything. And she seemed to have a ferocious appetite. And I thought, what an appetite for such a little woman. And she was just eating, and all you could see is her head just moving back like this. And I stood there shaking. And then one of the security guards, Mrs. Parks, this is the guy that's gonna do the speech and sing the Black National Anthem. His name is David Johnson. And she finished. She turned around. Hi, baby. That's the first thing she said. And it reminded me of my great-grandmother. And my eyes started to water. This is the mother of the movement, the civil rights movement, the Montgomery bus boycott. I used to watch her being fingerprinted in my history book, and now I'm standing face to face with her. And I said, my name is David Johnson. And she said, okay. I said, I'm going to be, I know, baby. I said, well, can I give you a hug? Come on over here. And so I gave her a hug. And then she said, you want to give me some sugar too? I said, yes, ma'am. So I hugged her. And then she said, all right, baby, what song you gonna sing? I said, the Black National Anthem. And it's such a long song. And then she said, I know, baby, I'm tired of that song. I love the song, but I'm so tired. Everywhere I go, they do the song. Can you sing a special song for me? I said, yes. So I looked at my pianist at the time, and no, Brother Tim wasn't there that day, but he was there on many of the days, but he wasn't there that day. And so I said, yes. And he said, yes, it goes like this. And this is the song, boy, that I sang to myself to keep from crying when I sat in that jail cell. I said, really? And every time I thought that I was gonna cry, because I ain't never been arrested before, boy, I started thinking about this song my grandmama taught me when she said, don't you ever feel like you anybody's slave. You're a child of God. So whenever you start to feel inferior, girl, you sing this song. And could you sing the song? I said, well, what is it? And in her Alabama accent, before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Then she said, I said, oh, freedom, I know that song. And I sang that song for her. And she was sitting up high on a perch in the chair, her and her manager. And I was standing on the stage and there's people all around. And when I would sing that song, tears would just come down her face. Because I could only imagine that it took her back to a time she was arrested for just wanting to be treated fairly. We don't even understand that today and take our liberties for granted. We forget where we've come from, she told me. Then she said, boy, after the program, we spent 3 hours in Anaheim Hills at a house. And there was a piano there and a couch and everything. She said, where that boy at? I want him to come on in here. That sounds so much like my old pastor. That's how she said. So I came in there, Dave, Miss Parks wants to talk to you. I said, oh, yes. So I came in and brought her a plate. And boy, she tore that plate up. Food was gone, just like that. I said, where did that food go? I said, the mother of the movement has tricks up her sleeve. So all of a sudden, I sat down. She said, sit down, boy. I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, I want your pianist to come in here. So he came in, and I want you to just sing these songs for me. And then she would tell me what the songs meant. Then in between the song, after we did Oh Freedom, and we did Steal Away. Boy, what's the history book say why I didn't give up my seat? I said, because your feet were tired. My feet wasn't tired. See how those history books lie? My soul was tired. Now finish singing that song, boy. And we sat there. And she told me all kind of stories about Dr. King. She told me all kind of stories about the prejudice and racism that they saw that's not even in the history books. And she said that if anything, we should be celebrated because now people got their freedom. She says because of what we did. And they sit up here and they hate us's. She said they hate us's and they forget what the Lord had us do. We the ones that was out there walking and getting things were being thrown at, shot at, hanged, and all that. And then her eyes started to water. And she said, people forget, but the Lord remembers, child. So don't you ever feel like you nothing but a child of God. And then she started wanting me to keep singing that song. But I was on the internet, and I can remember a lady said so very beautifully, when it was, we talk about the Black Lives Matter, some people get upset. Well, all lives matter. Well, it's only because we're getting killed in disproportionate numbers by the cops. I mean, when a cop pulls you over, you get nervous because you don't know how it's gonna go down. Even if you say, yes, sir, no, sir, no, sir, that still doesn't mean you're gonna come out alive. So you just have to be prayed up. But why should we have to live like that in 2016? And so this Asian lady of all people, and I was telling this young lady, the Vietnamese lady, that an Asian lady, she got on Facebook and she said, had a sign up and she says, my fellow Asian Americans, our black brothers and sisters bore the burden for us so that most of us and our families would be here. It's time for us to stand and bear the burden with them. I thought that was so beautiful. That harkens back to our text. Greater love hath no man. We are to love one another. We are to stand up for what is right and love one another. All of us. If we're trying to go home, I don't know about you, but time is short. He's coming back. And you're going to let something like race and color keep you from the streets of gold? That's coming soon. And as I close, I want to close with a reminder of why I admire Dr. King. My great-grandmother, as she would teach me all these things, she said, David, if you love me, I want you to make the world remember what a disciple of God did. And I said, disciple? She says, well, Dr. King, he did what Jesus asked. Greater love hath no man than to lay down his life. What he did, everybody benefits from. Red, yellow, brown, black, or white. His sacrifice afforded all of us to be free, physically, mentally. So she said, I want you to make the world remember what he and others have done. Would you do that, David? I said, yes, ma'am. So I can remember when I was 9 years old, my grandfather took me over to his sister's home, my great aunt, and she took me to the attic, and she had me open up the footlocker, and she said, David, what do you see? And I saw a bulletin, I thought, on top with Martin Luther King's face on it. She said, read it. I looked down, and it said, Dr. Martin Luther King's funeral. She said, 10 years ago, I drove down from St. Louis to Atlanta, David, and I attended his funeral. I said, really, Aunt Ursula? Yes. Do you know that he preached his own eulogy? So I knew at 9 years old that my great aunt was getting up there in years. And I knew that she was forgetting that when you're dead, you can't preach, you know. But how was I going to say this to her? Because this was the 70s, and you'd get hit upside the head real quick if you showed disrespect. And I got hit upside the head all the time. Not because I was disrespectful, I was just mischievous, like running under the pews at church and things like that. And so I got a lot of whoopings. That's what it's called, whoopings, not spankings. We didn't get spanking. We got whoopings. My name was David Whoopins Johnson. Come on now, can I get an amen somewhere out there? And so I said, Aunt Ursula, so I made sure I was out of arm's reach in case she wanted to whoosh. So I said, Aunt Ursula, you know when you're dead, you can't preach. So he probably did something else, you know. She said, oh, just because I'm older, I don't know what I'm talking about? She said, well, you go, and as they always told me, you go to the library and prove me wrong on Monday. Oh, I couldn't wait till the bell rang, 2:30. As soon as the bell rang, I jumped out, dashed down Lexington Boulevard, headed down Taylor Avenue. I think I jumped over a couple of buses. I don't know. I was going real fast. And then I passed up and I'm going to go old school with this. I passed up a Amalams. You know what I'm talking about, Amalams. That's what they call it in the inner city, Amalams. No, it's not a new animal in the animal kingdom. It's just another term for ambulance. Ambulance. See, y'all didn't even know what I was talking about. But I passed by the Amalams. And I got to the library. That's right. It's not a new fruit that has seeds in it. The library. The library. See, when I'm at home or whatever, people really be laughing at that stuff, but you know. And so I walked in there, got my book out, and I started to read. And then I realized what my Aunt Ursula was saying. About 10 years later, while a student at Oakwood College in the 80s, I can remember that I went to Ebenezer Baptist Church they were trying to get me to meet Mrs. Coretta King so that I could do a speech for her. But we were leaving Memphis because we did a concert in Memphis, the USM Mass Gospel Choir, and we dropped off some people in Huntsville and headed on to Atlanta. I just missed her by an hour. I just missed Mrs. King. So while we were there, we went across the street to the church, and we were at the church rather, and we started to talk to some of the seniors that were there at the church. So me, being a student of history, I wanted to know about that speech that my great aunt talked about. The sermon was called the drum major instinct. He preached that sermon on February 4th, 1968. 2 months rather, to the day of his assassination, April 4th. And when he preached that, I went and talked to one of the older ladies that were there, and I asked her about that day. And she said, "Child, I remember that day so well. It was a beautiful Sunday morning. And we were so happy to have our pastor in town because you know he's always going all around the world. So he preached this beautiful sermon on the drum major instinct. The sermon on how most people have that drum major mentality, wanting to be first, wanting to always be out front. That if we be first, Dr. King said, we must be first in love. In love. Like our text, greater love hath no man. And so she said, but the sermon was so beautiful, but child, at the end of his sermon, he started talking about his own death. And we were wondering, what is he talking about? But as we look back on it, that was his version of what the Apostle Paul did when he said, I fought a good fight, I finished the course. This was Dr. King's version. Child, every time I hear it, it brings tears to my eyes. That's what she told me. But what I learned was they recorded the last part of the drum major instinct when he started talking about his own death, and they played it 2 months and 5 days later at his funeral. Thus the term, he preached his own eulogy. And as I close, I want to close with that excerpt as he made the transition from the drum major instinct, a powerful sermon, to what we know as the eulogy. And this best tells you that Dr. King fully understood John 15:12 through 17 about loving your brother even to death. Because if you lay down your life for your brother in love, you're going to pick it up again. And boy, when you pick it up again, you're going to live forever and ever and ever. And so it went a little bit like this. Remember, two months later, he was dead. You know, I guess we all think realistically about that day when we will be victimized. What is life's final common denominator? And that's something we call death. Every now and then I think about my own death, my own funeral. I don't think of it in a morbid sense, but every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would once said? And I'll leave the word with you this morning. If any of you around, when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. Every now and then I'd wondered what I'd want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. Oh, but I'd like somebody to mention that day Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. Like for somebody to say on that day that I did try to feed the hungry. Like for somebody to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. Like for somebody to say that day that I did try to visit those who were in prison. Like for somebody to say on that day that I tried to clothe those who were naked. Like for somebody to say on that day I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. That I was a drum major for righteousness. And all of the other shallow things would not matter. Won't have any money to leave behind. Won't have none of the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. I just want to leave a committed life behind. And that's all I want to say. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I could cheer somebody with a word of song, or if I can show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. Oh, if I could do my duty as a Christian ought, bring salvation to a world once wrought, if I could spread the message as the Master taught, then my living will not be in vain. 2 months later, he was gone. He laid down his life just like he was told to by the Most High, Yeshua, when he tells us, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain. That whatever, oh, I love this, whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you." But he ends again with this, lest you forget, "These things I command you, that you love one another." So this month, next month, all the other months, we should celebrate love for one another. Love has no color. Love has no color. And love isn't love until you've given it away. If the person that you claim to love doesn't feel your love, you're sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal. We are commanded, y'all, to love one another. Love has no color. There's no greater love that if you love someone enough to give up your own life for your brother. Jesus did it for us. Will we do it for one another? No greater love. Let's bow our heads. To the Most High, Yeshua, we thank you so much for shedding your blood for us, for giving us this command that many times we allow the enemy to allow us to trip over this command, to love one another. We know that first we must love you. Second, we must love our neighbor as ourselves. And who is our neighbor? It's those who are around us each and every day. How can we say we love you? We've never seen you, but we hate our brother who we see every day. It doesn't make sense, and we're only fooling ourselves. So this issue that we have, whether it be race, whether it be language or color or whatever the issue may be in the packaging, let us tear down these strongholds, for these are just weapons that Satan uses to keep us out of the kingdom. Because he knows his time is coming. His expiration date was confirmed when you said it is finished. And he knows, and he is a coward. And he wants to claim as many souls as possible so he won't burn alone. Help us not to be sheeple, follow after Satan's every lead. Help us, Father, to only follow after you, the true and only shepherd. For Father, you gave up your life for us, and you have taught us the way for us to do it for one another. We are commanded to do so. And if we love you, we will keep your commandments, not the way we want, but the way you commanded us to do. So that when it is all said and done, if we do our best, mixed in with a little grace from on high, then when you crack the sky, we can look up and say, lo, this is our God. He will save us, and you will draw us unto your own, and we will live with you forever and ever and ever. We thank you for your love and for your grace to be able to make heaven our home. And we want to love you so much that, as the song would say, Andre Crouch's song, If Heaven Was Never Promised to Me, if you never promised the streets of gold, or to live forever and to be able to walk and not be weary and run and not be faint, we still want to love you enough just because of what you did for us. Even if heaven was never promised, help us to still love you enough to do what you commanded us to do. And we know that if we do, you will save us. We thank you and we love you, and we ask for your covering as we go throughout our Sabbath day and throughout our week. Save us and cover us. In your name we pray. Amen.